Hey guys, it's King the Modder here, and I wanted to do a really quick tutorial on doing simplified textures in Substance Painter. If you've never used Substance Painter before, one of the most important things is setting your UV mapping up correctly. You can, with this style of UV map setup, you can do relatively advanced textures as well as extremely simplified textures. And by simplified textures, kind of what I mean is what you'd find in Unturned, for example. So I'll open up the UV editor on this model that I made really quickly here. And the biggest thing is separating items that are going to be different colors into different groups on your UV map, leaving enough space that you'll actually be able to know what group is separate from another. And it tends to make life really easy then. And the benefit to using Substance Painter over like manually creating your textures in Photoshop would be it'll create every map that you need automatically, as well as do an AO bake on it, and so it puts in just enough detail to get kind of some of the shading right, and it'll get the a normal map if you wanted one, although with low detail stuff you don't need that, as well as different games are going to call it different things, but kind of your gloss map as well, so showing how shiny the paint is actually going to be. What I've done here is taken everything that's going to be kind of a metal color and grouped it all in here, so you can see what components I've selected: the trigger guard, kind of the upper here, and the barrel and sights. And then I've got the rubber buttstock, and the rest of the stock is going to be wood or wood colored. And if you aren't using 3ds Max, I'm not overly familiar with like the process of transferring from Blender, but someone's made a really handy plugin for 3ds Max called Send to Substance. It's a little iffy with 2020. Maybe there's an update for it now that fixes this, but essentially in this case all I do is click that and hit Send to Substance. Another FBX export window will pop up. It's pretty easy, and then it automatically opens Substance Painter. The issue now, for whatever reason, is that Substance Painter doesn't automatically open the file, but what Send to Substance does that just a regular FBX export doesn't do is it allows you to have multiple you're able to do multiple textures at once. Otherwise, if you just do a regular FBX export, it'll combine, like right now I have all this in one piece, but if I had 3 separate meshes, they'll all show up in the same texture and it'll just overlap their UV maps, so it doesn't work very good. So Send to Substance will allow you to throw a material on top of the part and then give it a name, and then it'll show up under that name in Substance Painter. So you'd start a new file. Depending on the game that you're going to be throwing your model and texture into, some of the settings are going to make a bit of a difference, such as if you're using normal maps, then the normal map format is going to make a massive difference. I know, for example, in Runner, if you were to use a DirectX normal map format, it'll actually put like a weird kind of cross texture throughout it, so it just makes a grid and it looks terrible. All you gotta do is select your file, and I've got everything else kind of set up already. And then your first step is going to be going into the texture settings. If you don't see the texture settings window here, window views, and then texture settings. And you'll need pretty much all of these if you're doing larger projects. So you'll want the texture settings, layers, and properties. First step, once we're in here, typically you want a base color, and the very simplified textures, you really don't need height. You could have it on there if you were looking to make something more advanced. And then you have roughness and your ambient occlusion map. And then you're just going to scroll down and hit bake maps and bake selected textures. Depending on the resolution that you choose to bake the textures at, it may or may not take longer than this. 4K usually takes about a minute, depending on how many maps you have to do. If you have multiple meshes that you're doing textures for, then like if I made the barrel like a separate piece instead of all being grouped together, and I had a separate UV map for it, then I'd have, instead of just shoddy, I'd have like shoddy and then barrel underneath, and I'd have to select barrel afterwards and do bake maps on that as well. So now that's done, you can go into the layers and into materials, and you can do smart materials. Those are really great for more advanced textures, but we're doing something pretty simplified, and we want something that's going to be pretty matte as well if we're going kind of for the unturned look. So I'm just going to click on that and drag it over here, and it's applying to the whole gun, and we don't want that. So the next step to that will be right click on it and add black mask. And right after doing that, you can see there's a little blue window around the black square, and then there's the blue square on the left there. This little blue square around the black one is meaning that's the current one selected, which is what we want. Now we're going to click on this guy right here, polygon fill. That allows us to select individual polygons on our UV map instead of on the model. We could do on the model as well, like I could click on that, now you can see blues showing up. But so we're going to start with the stock, and I'm going to select all those and then go back over to the color just by clicking on that there. And too much green in it. Now it's just kind of tune the color to how you want it. That looks good enough for me. Maybe I'll put a tiny bit more color in it and then darken it a little bit more. Yeah, so that looks good enough for me. Then our next step is going to be creating another one just by dragging and dropping, and we could even throw another one underneath as well. And then right click on the layer we just threw on there and add black mask. And then the black mask is automatically selected, and we're still in polygon fill, and we're going to do the rubber next. And now you can see over here it's updated. And I'm going to hide that for now so it doesn't confuse us. And then our next step is to change that color to something that we like. So we're going to do something that's pretty dark and not a whole lot of blue to it at all. So we're going to stay right around in there. And I'm going to zoom in on that section a little bit, get a little bit of reflection going. And so I'm looking at right here. Actually, we might try this angle. And to kind of emulate the rubber a little bit, it's usually not very shiny, so we're actually going to make that more matte. The roughness is going to be how glossy or how shiny an object is, at least with how I have my substance painter set up. There might be some other setups where roughness is not going to be controlling shine level, but in my case that's what we have. So then again, I'm gonna enable this guy, add black mask, and still polygon fill is selected, and we're gonna drag over this section now. And this is why the UV map setup beforehand is extremely important. It makes this really easy to do. And select our color, and we're gonna do a gray that's got a tiny bit of blue to it, so it's kind of silverish. And I'm happy enough with that. It's got a little bit of shine to it as well, which is fine. And I mean, you could make it god-awful shiny. Some games really aren't gonna like that. Mudrunner and Spin Tires, for example, if you do this, it just looks black. It just shows up as black in game. The shaders for that are terrible. And in Mudrunner and Spin Tires, you're usually actually down like in the bottom quarter of this bar. But we'll probably make it around like that. And actually, I'm going to darken this just a tad. Yeah, that looks pretty good. You can see we don't have any like extra detail on here. There's no dirt or anything like that. If you wanted to throw dirt on it, it's actually pretty easy as well. But we won't really get into that here. This is pretty much everything that you need for it. And then when you want to export this, you just go to the File, Export Textures, and then there's a list of kind of templates in here. If you're not doing it for any of these games that are in here, then you can create your own. And for Snowrunner, this is what I use. So I've got different tags at the end of the texture, and then the $sign texture set means that this shoddy is my texture set. If I had multiple texture sets, then when I export, it'll export all of them at once, and it would, this name for this, for example, would be king-shoddy __n_d, and so on. And then all you have to do is apply the right channels. So for a normal, your normal kind of color channel, so to speak, you're going to be using the diffuse RGB, this guy here, and I have an alpha map on here as well, for doing like tires and stuff like that in Snowrunner, Mudrunner, and Spin Tires. And alpha map's going to control how much mud gets put onto those areas. So for that one, we were just using the opacity grayscale, this guy here. If you have, if the game you're exporting it into has a map for shine, then or a specular map, then we've got the metallic grayscale, roughness grayscale, and ambient occlusion grayscale put in individually as RGB. In this case, it's going to be different in every game that you do, but I'm just walking through what I currently have. So go in here, select Snowrunner, and then you can choose your export format. And again, Snowrunner, we usually use Targa or .tga, and then you just click export, and everything's exported, and you can open the open this up, and you can see this is my specular map here. I believe that's what the SH is. They always change everything around this, and then this is my color map here. And if we want to go into 3ds Max, now that we have this, I don't remember if it'll let me drag and drop into here, so we're going to try. Look at that, it does. And assign material to selection, turn that off, and now you can see I've got my texture inside of 3ds Max as well. And shaders in Max are going to be totally different from every other game, so this looks really black and you can't see most of the detail. Depending on your game, that it might show up exactly the same, it might not. But, the biggest thing is, setting your UV map up so you can really quickly and efficiently texture in here inside a Substance Painter. And then after that, it's easy to step up into doing more advanced stuff too, if you ever were to design something for a more complicated game. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped you out.